It was Thanksgiving night when I woke to laughter that didn't belong to me. The kind of laughter that once filled my home with warmth, now floated through the floorboards like a cruel echo from another life. My house felt full, yet I had never felt emptier. I checked the clock. 6:32 p.m. Dinner had begun. No one called me. No knock on my door. Just the faint sound of glasses clinking and plates scraping against porcelain. I stood up, straightened my shirt, brushed back my hair, and started down the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the one before, as if the house itself was warning me not to go. From the last step, I saw it, the golden glow of the chandelier spilling over a long table crowded with faces. 10 people. Plates piled high, wine glasses catching the light, laughter frozen mid-breath as they noticed me. My daughter sat at the head of the table, her husband beside her. My place, gone, erased as if I had never existed. "Why didn't you call me for dinner?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. The room fell silent. My daughter looked at her husband. He smirked, enjoying the show. Then he stood up, slow and deliberate, and walked toward the kitchen. A moment later he returned, holding a white plastic bucket. He set it in front of me like a gift. I looked inside. Coffee grounds, turkey bones, greasy napkins, the leftovers of gratitude. "Here's your plate, Pops," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. My daughter laughed, not kindly but sharply like broken glass. "Now your food looks right, freeloader." The word hit harder than any blow could. Around the table no one moved. 10 witnesses, 10 heartbeats, and one father, frozen. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, I placed the bucket gently on the floor, not in anger but in quiet respect for myself. Then I turned, walked toward the stairs, and climbed them without looking back. Each step echoed through the silence that followed. Behind me, laughter rose again, shallow and cruel. But something inside me had changed forever. It didn't break, it hardened. And that night, though they didn't know it yet, everything they had built on my kindness had just begun to crumble. Their laughter kept echoing through the floorboards long after I reached my room. Each burst of joy from below hit like a reminder that I no longer belonged to the warmth of my own home. I sat alone in the dim light, staring at the locked door. One soft click, yet it felt like the sound of freedom. On my desk lay old bills, forgotten notes, and quiet fragments of a life built on patience. For 3 long years they had lived on my kindness and called it theirs, spending what I earned, mocking what I gave, draining the meaning out of generosity. That night I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I simply decided that mercy had run its course. I made a promise to myself. No anger, no chaos, no shouting. Justice doesn't need noise, it begins in silence. I opened my laptop, the pale glow washing over my hands, steady and sure. Numbers replaced emotions. Logic replaced pain. Every keystroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had stolen. The man who once tolerated their cruelty was gone. In his place sat someone colder, clearer, unshakable, a man who no longer begged to be respected, but quietly prepared to take everything back. And in that silence, somewhere deep inside the darkness, a new version of me began to breathe for the first time. The house had grown quiet, but sleep refused to come. I sat in front of the faint blue glow of my laptop, the screen reflecting a face I barely recognized, calm, hollow, but focused. Hours slipped by as my fingers moved across the keyboard, not in rage but in purpose. I built spreadsheets instead of shouting, numbers instead of words. Each row told a story. Dates. Receipts. Every dollar they had drained from me dressed itself in black and white. Rent, $1,500 a month, never paid once. Utilities, groceries, repairs, all mine. Line after line became evidence, a silent testimony of years spent giving without return. When I opened the credit card statements, it felt like reopening old wounds. Gaming consoles, spa visits, designer restaurants, items that spoke of comfort, theirs not mine. Every charge was a scar, written in digital ink. I remembered each conversation that came with it. "We'll pay you back. It's just temporary." Lies I'd accepted because I couldn't bear to see my daughter struggle. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, the screen showed the truth. $78,247. That number stared back at me like a verdict, cold, merciless, final. Proof of what kindness had cost. I leaned back, my eyes burning, my heart steady. This wasn't revenge. This was balance returning to a tilted scale. I renamed the file Family Support 2022 to 2025, saved it carefully on the desktop, and closed the laptop with a quiet click. Tomorrow I would start cutting every cord that tied me to them. And for the first time in years that thought didn't hurt, it healed. Sunrise found me calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace but from precision. For the first time in years I felt control replacing chaos, accountant's discipline taking the place of a father's heartbreak. My fingers didn't shake as they hovered over the phone, they moved with quiet certainty. The first call was simple: remove my daughter as an authorized user. Her name vanished from the account in seconds, a small digital erasure that felt far heavier than the act itself. The second call came next, my son-in-law's name deleted from my Visa card. The man who once mocked me at my own table now no longer existed in my financial world. Then came the third. The bank clerk's voice was polite and professional as she confirmed. Debit access revoked, passwords changed, security pins reset. I chose a new one. Bucket 2025, poetic justice disguised as irony. Each confirmation email felt like another chain snapping free. With every click, a lifetime of dependence dissolved into clean, silent numbers. By 7 a.m., they still slept peacefully under my roof, unaware that the world they'd built on my money had just collapsed. I looked around my room, for walls that had watched me endure too much. On the bed lay a small suitcase. I packed with the efficiency of a man who had already left long ago. A few shirts, 2 pairs of pants, my laptop, my documents, and the proof of everything they'd taken. Before leaving, I found a notepad on the kitchen counter and wrote one simple line in my neat, accountant handwriting: gone to visit friends. I left it there beside a cold coffee mug, smiled faintly, and locked the door behind me. They'd never guess which friends I was going to see because this time my friends had names like justice, silence, and freedom. Dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold as I quietly closed the front door behind me. The air outside felt different, light, untouched, honest. My car sat in the driveway, waiting like an old friend who had seen too much but asked no questions. When the engine came to life, it purred softly, almost like an accomplice in my quiet escape. I drove east, leaving behind streets I had memorized for 40 years. The city slowly faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the blur of morning traffic and the faint hum of possibility. 15 miles later I found it, a flickering neon sign that read Sunset Motor Inn. Cheap, hidden, forgettable. Perfect. I paid in cash, keeping my name off every record. No paper trail. No trace. The clerk handed me a key to room 217, barely looking up from his newspaper. Inside, beige walls and a floral bedspread greeted me, the kind of dull, quiet space where no one cared who you were or what you were running from. And somehow that anonymity felt like peace. For the first time in years, silence wasn't heavy or lonely. It was mine. The air felt cleaner. The world felt new. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop and stared at the screen. My reflection looked older but freer. Then I began to type, a new email, short and precise, to Attorney Margaret Whitfield. Subject, Elder Financial Abuse and Property Law. The words looked strange on the screen but they fit me perfectly. That message wasn't just a complaint, it was a declaration. The first step toward reclaiming not just my money but my name, my peace, and my dignity. That morning, in that small, forgotten motel room, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it begins in silence, paid in cash and tucked behind a door that only you can open. By noon my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. One call after another. Their panic had begun to bloom exactly as I expected. Every vibration across the nightstand was a ripple of the storm I'd left behind. The first voicemail came from Rossman. Her voice trembled, soft and uncertain. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I could almost see her pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, tears rehearsed but not yet real. An hour later her tone changed, sharper now, frustration creeping through the cracks of fear. This isn't funny, Dad. The cards aren't working. Did something happen with the bank? The third message came near sunset, the one she must have practiced in her head before speaking. Please, we didn't mean it. It was just a joke. Please call me back. But not once in all those messages did I hear the word sorry. Then came Theodore. His messages were shorter, colder. Heavy breathing. A half sentence here, a cut off there. Listen, old man, then silence. I imagined his jaw tightening, realizing anger over the phone couldn't fix what he'd broken. I sat on the motel bed, phone in hand, the room dim except for the glow from the lamp. I listened to each one, then deleted them all, slowly, deliberately, without an ounce of hesitation. The sound of each deletion was cleaner than any apology I could have heard. I'd spent decades letting emotion control me, giving love, giving patience, giving second chances. But not this time. This time logic held the crown. I had learned the most powerful answer wasn't shouting back or explaining myself. It was silence. Because silence is louder than anger. It's colder than revenge. And when it comes from a man who's finally had enough, it becomes a weapon no one can defend against. Saturday morning arrived soft and gray, the kind of quiet that feels like a clean page. I drove downtown with a folder on the passenger seat, documents, receipts, and 3 years' worth of buried disappointment. The office was small but neat, tucked inside a weathered brick building. The name on the frosted glass door read Daniel Kova, Property Law. He looked up from his desk as I entered. A calm man, maybe in his 50s, with tired eyes that had seen too many family disputes. "Mr. Torres," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Tell me everything." I told him the truth, stripped of emotion. No lease, no rent, no contract. They've lived in my home for 3 years, paid nothing, and last week they humiliated me in front of 10 people. He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. "Then they're guests," he replied simply. "And guests can be uninvited." Those words felt heavier than any law book on his shelf. Guests can be uninvited. He drafted the paperwork with the calm of someone used to turning pain into process. 15 days notice, formal, legal, final. I signed each page without trembling, my signature curling across the lines with quiet authority. When it was done, he said, $450 covers everything, drafting, mailing, delivery. $450 for peace. After 3 years of emotional bankruptcy, it felt like a bargain. When I left his office, I carried the copies under my arm like proof of something sacred. Not revenge, not hate, just boundaries finally drawn in ink instead of hope. By Wednesday they would have the letter in hand. Their world would shift the way mine once did, without warning, without mercy. And for the first time, justice wasn't an idea floating somewhere far away. It had a date, a document, and a deadline. Tuesday afternoon I returned home. The driveway was empty, the windows glowing faintly with the comfort they still believed was theirs. When I opened the door, the scent of coffee and perfume lingered in the air, the illusion of normalcy. Theodore appeared first, his smile stretching wide, too quick, too fake. "You're back," he said, tone dripping with counterfeit warmth. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the dining table, the same table where they once laughed over my humiliation, and placed 2 crisp envelopes on its polished surface. 15 days, I said quietly. My voice didn't rise, it didn't need to. His grin cracked, the corners of his mouth trembling into something uglier. Rossman came from the kitchen, mascara already smudging around her eyes, confusion painted over guilt. "Dad, what is this?" she asked. When her trembling fingers tore open the envelope, her face drained of color. "You'd evict your own daughter?" she sobbed, voice shaking between disbelief and anger. I looked at her for a long moment, long enough to remember the nights I stayed awake to pay her bills, the years I carried her life like a weight on my shoulders. "I gave you years," I said softly. "And you gave me a bucket." The silence that followed was louder than any argument could have been. Theodore tried to speak, but I'd already turned toward the stairs. His voice chased me halfway up, words tumbling into threats, apologies, excuses, all blending into meaningless noise. By the time I closed my bedroom door, the house had turned into a war zone of whispers and slammed drawers. I sat at my desk, pulled out a worn notebook and opened to the first blank page. At the top, I wrote 3 words in steady ink. Incident log, December. Then beneath it, the first entry, Day 1, served notice. They know now. It wasn't just a record of events. It was the audit of my heart, the beginning of truth written line by line so that someday even silence would have evidence. The nights grew louder after the letters arrived. What used to be laughter had turned into noise, banging cabinets, slamming doors, footsteps that stomped just to be heard. I didn't respond. I had no need to. I'd already learned that silence cuts deeper than shouting ever could. But silence, I knew, wasn't enough anymore. I needed proof. Evidence doesn't argue, it endures. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought 2 small security cameras. Nothing fancy, just quiet, reliable eyes that never blinked. When I returned, I waited until they left for the store, then installed them one by one. One above the kitchen doorway, another facing the sink. Red lights blinked faintly in the shadows, tiny dots of truth ready to record whatever came next. The following day I watched the footage. Theodore stood in the kitchen, crouched under the sink, twisting something with deliberate care. His face calm, his movements practiced. A few minutes later, water flooding the floor. He straightened up, smirked, and walked away. I paused the video, stared at the still frame, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Proof: clear, undeniable, merciless. A plumber's report confirmed what the footage already said: deliberate damage. Intentional sabotage. I scanned the report, attached it to an email and sent it to Theodore, CC'd to my lawyer for good measure. 10 minutes later, from downstairs, came the inevitable roar. "That bastard." His voice cracked the silence like thunder. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I just smiled faintly at the screen, opened my notebook and typed the next line. December log, Incident 1. It felt good, not out of spite but out of justice. For once, I wasn't the man being cornered. I was the man keeping the record. And this time, the truth was finally on my side. Late at night, I fell back into the habit that had always steadied me, opening the bank statements and reading them like testimony. The motel room was quiet, the laptop's glow the only witness as I scrolled through months of charges. At first they looked like small, careless things. Best Buy $1,847, Men's Warehouse $623, Ruth's Chris $234, each one a bright pin where my money had been spent on someone else's comforts. I kept going. The pattern sharpened into something ugly and undeniable. Gaming consoles, boutique clothes, dinners at places I had never sat in, all paid from the account I had trusted them to respect. Piece by piece the ledger built a portrait of betrayal. When the spreadsheet summed the last 6 months, the total stared back at me: $12,427. It felt less like a number and more like a verdict. I called Kova and read the figures without theatrics. "I have documentation," I told him. His answer was immediate: practiced, then we act. He drafted a demand letter: reimbursement within 30 days or we file suit. The language was clinical, final. I printed a copy, folded it into an envelope and walked back into my house. Theodore was on the couch, the same man who'd handed me a bucket and asked the room to laugh. I set the envelope in front of him and watched the color drain from his face as he read. Threats came out like dry air. "You'll die alone," he spat, trying to frighten me into retreat. I met him without flinching. "Better alone than surrounded by thieves," I said. The sentence landed clean. The ledger had spoken. The private theft was now a public demand. The days began to shrink toward December 10th, and the house changed its rhythm. The shouting had stopped. In its place came whispers, the hiss of packing tape, the shuffle of boxes being filled. I didn't interfere. I moved through my routines quietly, each footstep measured, each breath a countdown. By the morning of December 5th, the sound of tires on gravel woke me. I looked through the window and saw the moving trucks in the driveway, large, hungry machines ready to swallow everything they had ever claimed as theirs. From the upstairs landing I watched them move, loading furniture, boxes, the clutter of their comfort. Every thud against the truck bed was like a chapter closing. Theodore caught me watching. His glare was sharp, a last attempt to cut what was already gone. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low but shaking with anger. I met his eyes through the glass and answered simply, "I regret waiting." He turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. Rossman lingered behind, slower, quieter. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the child she once was, the one who used to reach for my hand. There were tears but no words. There was nothing left to say. Engine started. Dust rose. The trucks pulled out of the driveway, carrying their laughter, their cruelty, and the years I could never get back. I stood by the window until the last bit of noise dissolved into the distance. Then morning light spilled through the windows, soft and golden, touching every corner of the empty rooms. The echoes of chaos were gone. In their place was the gentle hum of quiet. I opened every window wide, letting the cold air sweep through, cleansing the walls that had witnessed too much. It felt like forgiveness, the kind that doesn't come from people but from space itself. Outside, the locksmith worked in silence. The sound of the drill hummed low and steady, a strange kind of music that marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. When he handed me the new set of keys, I turned them in my palm, feeling their weight, lighter, cleaner. The old keys lay on the table, useless now, just bits of metal that no longer opened anything that belonged to me. I brewed a pot of coffee, the smell curling through the air like a reward. For the first time, I sat in my kitchen without tension in my chest. I took a slow sip, listening to the peaceful hum of an empty house. A voice startled me from outside, Judy Brennan, my neighbor, waving as she passed by. She smiled softly and said, "You did the right thing." For the first time, I believed her. I smiled back, turned to my laptop and typed into the search bar, "Paint colors, New Dawn." The screen filled with soft blues and quiet golds, colors that looked like forgiveness. Peace, I realized, had a color after all, and it looked like morning. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that rare, weightless kind of calm. The kind that comes after the storm has taken everything it was meant to. But just as I began to breathe it in, my phone buzzed. One notification. One missed name. An unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I answered. A familiar voice, small, trembling, whispered, "Dad, we need to talk." The world seemed to still. The coffee went cold. Silence. Fade to black. For the first time in years, my house exhaled. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean, whole, and mine.